All right, in just 5 weeks, the biggest event in America will be right here, Las Vegas. So are you coming? Is your team coming? We're going to be here. The road to Vegas and Beat the Odds starts right now.
From our Las Vegas studios, this is Beat the Odds, sponsored by Superbook Westgate Las Vegas.
All right, here we go. Welcome inside our Las Vegas studio. I'm Dave Hall, and yes, to the obvious, while backpacking through the Alps, I tore my Achilles.
Wait, I thought you were being chased by a bear. Or I also heard you were saving an old lady from a thief.
Those are all so much better stories. The truth is, I tore my Achilles playing pickleball against my wife.
The wife always wins in this situation, clearly. But I think maybe you should stick with the bear story. Makes you sound tough. But like Dave, injuries are a huge part of the football season. See how they impact the betting lines and play a huge role in who raises that trophy at the end.
All right, also coming up on today's show, the race to Vegas is on. See which teams look primed for big runs. Plus, Jack and Teddy will have their best bets.
I catch up with our friend Jeff Slauson in Cleveland to break down Flacco Mania. Plus, Brandon Marshall joins us to talk which teams are capable of knocking off the top seeds in each conference. I'll be back shortly. Dave, hobble away.
I'm coming, fellas. I'm coming.
So I guess no golf.
Bill, too.
No golf later today.
No anything from me. How are you guys doing? How's your New Year going?
It was better than yours, obviously. And the true story is that your wife dominated you at pickleball, and then you got hurt.
We could have left that detail out.
Well,
Jack.
I appreciate you doing the extra research for what Aaron Rodgers has had to go through. I mean, I like that you're going that extra mile to put yourself inside the game.
If anybody has the number to his doctor, please send it our way.
Well, big weeks with 17, and now we move on to 18.
Sure, but we got to talk a little bit about what happened this past week when we talk about some bad beats and some shockers.
Worse than mine?
Nothing's worse than yours.
Yeah. But these are not pickleball injuries. These are football injuries. And we got to start with Detroit on the money line against Dallas. That was a brutal beat. If you had Detroit in that ballgame, not one, not two, three chances to make the two-point conversion. None of them succeeded. Dallas on the money line gets the money. Tough beat for Detroit backers. How about Indy -3.5 against Las Vegas? Of course, the backdoor touchdown is going to get scored on 4th down in the closing seconds. Vegas comes through, gets the money. Tough beat for those who had Indy. And of course, Michigan, Alabama in Pasadena. Yeah, first it gets to overtime, and then they score a touchdown in overtime. Under 46.5. Game lands 47. Ouch for underbettors in that ballgame.
Yeah, national championship game, obviously that one hurts. Anytime you get in overtime and lose a total when it goes over, that's tough. I think McCarthy needs to go back and figure out how to time manage games late. I mean, I don't know what's going on, how Detroit even had a chance late in that game to get it done. So a lot of different crazy things, but you're right. That was a tough ending to that one as well.
No doubt. And of course, there were some shockers as well to talk about that are definitely worth mentioning. Let's start with what, Miami? Yeah, they took all the money against Baltimore, and that wasn't right. They got annihilated. Baltimore hung a 56 burger on them. That's something of a shocker. Buffalo took all the money against New England. They were +3 in turnovers and still didn't cover the number. Yeah, that's kind of a shocker. And then Seattle losing outright to Pittsburgh at home, could not stop the run, gashed at the line of scrimmage. Another shocker worth remembering as we look forward now to Week 18.
Well, and what about the G-men? I mean, them getting it done. I mean, you want to talk about uncomfortable. When you start handing out to clients and playing teams like that typically can't score, but then you change quarterbacks and then they get there. Some of those things happen this time of year. You're going to get some of these spots where you've got backups playing. Those are baked into the line, so everybody needs to be very, very careful about just saying, hey, my quarterback's on the other team not going to play. Let's go ahead and play the team that has something to play for. That is, generally speaking, a way to lose a lot of money this time of year.
And I know these Week 18 games can be pretty wonky. We're going to dive more into that with you guys coming up in a little bit. A bunch of teams do have a lot to play for, though, this weekend. Question is, are they still safe bets? Here's Mariah at the Superbook Westgate Las Vegas.
Thanks, Dave. I'm here with EVP of Superbook Operations, Jay Cornegay. Jay, we're on to the final week of the season. Still 6 teams in that playoff push right now, win and in situation. Do those teams that are on the outside looking in have the edge this week?
Not all the time. You would think so because they have all the world to play for, but history tells us that these other teams come in and they can play very well. They come in very loose, so I wouldn't count on those teams being in that win-and-end scenario advancing in the playoffs.
And obviously, lineups are very different in Week 18. The teams that are already in the playoffs resting their players. On the flip side, you have other teams going all out. How imperative is it to look at the lineups ahead of the game, and how does that impact the lines?
It's very challenging for everybody here because the lineups are changing, the roster is changing, and a lot of this information comes out daily. So we're keeping our ear to the ground. We're keeping track of social media as this information come in today. It could come in right before kickoff, but it certainly has an impact on the line.
Switching to the college game, the championship stage is set. Michigan and Washington. What have you heard from the Sharps early on for that game?
Well, we posted Michigan as a favorite at 3.5. We had some sharp money come in and lay the 3.5. A little bit at 4. It settled in at 4.5. But I expect it to be very balanced as the public will probably favor Washington. They were all over Washington, over Texas. So I think it's going to be a very well-balanced game, a very public game, and a lot of action.
All right, Jay, thank you so much. Dave, we'll send it back to you in studio.
All right, thanks to you two. As they were talking about betting these Week 18 games can be tricky, Teddy's going to explain how some coaches will tell us how to bet. That's nice. Plus, are Baltimore and San Francisco on a collision course? Well, not so fast, says Brandon Marshall. See which teams he thinks could knock off the top dogs.
Before we head to break, with 230 passing yards in Week 17, San Francisco quarterback Brock Purdy broke the team's single-season passing yards record. Whose record did he break? The answer when we come back.
Beat the Odds is sponsored by Superbook Westgate Las Vegas.
Welcome back. Before the break, we asked you, with 230 passing yards in Week 17, San Francisco quarterback Brock Purdy broke the team's single-season passing yards record. Whose record did he break? The answer, Jeff Garcia, who threw for 4,278 yards in 2000.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Mariah. Back with Brandon Marshall. And look, Brandon, we have matching injuries now. I've got mine, and you've got your finger.
Show
the infamous finger.
We have war wounds. You know, it happens to the best of us, man. We're both sportsmen. I understand, man.
Well, that's a strong statement to make, sportsmen, but I'll take it. Well, let's dive in. You know, we are now just 5 weeks away from the big game right here in Las Vegas. Of course, you've been to that game a couple times. Your Denver team won it, that Peyton Manning team. What's kind of the mindset of a team knowing that that's the goal and it's achievable for your team?
Interesting enough, I actually had a dream about it last night.
Really?
Yeah, that we won it again against the same Carolina team, which was kind of weird. But you know, the mindset is you go in and you just try to do your best one game at a time, one practice at a time. But the closer you get, you just can't help but get excited, right? You get excited and you understand that these games, right, are coming down to it's about who makes the least amount of mistakes.
Right.
You know what I mean? Who makes the least amount of mistakes? And so while we're prepping all throughout practice and we understand we're playing the game, you got to just play the cleanest game that you can play.
Do you dream often about football?
You know, sometimes, every now and then it'll come on and off, but yesterday I was literally in my orange jersey, and, we beat Carolina, and I was dancing, and it was
wow.
Oh, man, I really woke up, and I was like, man, I missed the game.
I mean, you look like you could still play, so, hey, Denver, if you need some help, give them a call. All right, so, I mean, right now, it looks like we have two pretty dominant teams, right? Baltimore and San Francisco.
Yeah.
Do you see anybody knocking them off on the road to Las Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, well, on the AFC side, I will say, Cleveland is a team to really watch because, that team is scary with the #1 defense, and Joe Flacco is playing out of his mind. He's playing out of his mind. The last 4 games, 300-plus yards. They're division rivals, right? So that could be a game to watch for Baltimore. They have to be on their P's and Q's because, that team is really hitting on all cylinders right now.
What about on the NFC side? Do you see anybody knocking off San Francisco?
The NFC side, look, Philadelphia has kind of just plummeted, right? They've kind of plummeted. I know San Francisco has home field advantage, so that helps because Dallas can't play. There's two different teams on the on the road and at home. So I'm not a believer in Dallas. Detroit, they play everybody tough, so maybe that could be a team that can to watch out for against San Francisco. But right now, San Francisco looks like they got a cleaner path to the big game.
Last thing real quick, we've talked a lot about who's going to win the MVP. It's got to be Lamar Jackson, right?
Oh yeah, no, I think it's Lamar. You know, after he beat, in the fashion that what he beat San Francisco and then throwing for 5 touchdowns against Miami.
Right.
Come on, man. It has to be Lamar. Even though, look, Brock Purdy had a great season. You know, Dak had a really good season as well. But Lamar, the way he ended the season, #1 seed, you have to give it to him.
Got it. All right. Well, Brandon Marshall, as always, thank you, sir. Now let's check in with Jack, see what he's working on for us.
Well, if you've been watching this show, we gave people Baltimore back in August or September, so that's really, really good that he's finishing. Brandon's right about that. But it's almost a good idea at this time of year to look back on what got us here that worked and what didn't work. You know, a lot of guys like to auto-bet different situations when they're talking about these games. So we would look at last year and we say, okay, what about good teams? All right, we got Buffalo. Baltimore was supposed to do really well. If you just auto-bet those type of teams, you're basically paying juice. Talk about good defenses. Cleveland, Denver was supposed to have a good defense. Again, you're right around 500. Coaches, what about coaches? Belichick, Mike Tomlin, those situations also about 50% against the number. And what about from last year? Kansas City, Philadelphia, if you bet those teams, you're basically breaking even against the number, paying juice. So the lesson here is you can't look at what one team for one spot, especially in pro football, and expect to make money. What you should be doing this time of year, when you don't score points for a consistent amount of time, you can typically continue that going forward. They're really hard to fix offenses this time of year, so teams that aren't scoring a lot, play them under the total at this point in the year. Teams like New England, teams like the G-Men, those type teams are going to be able to continue to predict their continued lack of efficiency offensively.
Teddy, let's bring you in. We've talked about how tricky betting this week can be because guys are in, guys are out. You know, who cares, who doesn't? But you had an interesting tip. Listen to what the coaches are telling you during their press conferences.
Absolutely. I mean, week 18, in my mind, I call it a discipline week. It's kind of like the final week of the preseason where you're not going to pepper the board with a bunch of wagers. You're looking for a handful, 2 or 3 good bets, and you're very, very happy for a week 18 card. And one thing that you just talked about, Dave, pay attention to the coach's quotes. And this is something that's really good in the preseason, and it's really good for week 18. And you try to read between the lines. When a coach is saying, we're going to get our side guys some playing time, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be playing in the fourth quarter when point spreads are likely to be decided. And the most important thing for week 18 to remember, must win doesn't equal will win. And we see this every year. Must-win teams, LA at San Fran, Jacksonville at Tennessee, Tampa at Carolina, Green Bay at Minnesota. I'll put the over-under at 2.5 wins out of those 4.
Now, can you decipher a Bill Belichick press conference between the grunts and the moans? And
He's grumpy, probably needs a nap. That's what we get out of Belichick.
all right, and so does he from time to time,
right.
so they can relate. All right, you guys, stick around. We got a Big Daddy game in college football Monday night. Michigan, Washington. These two will break down the numbers, the trends, and who could raise that crystal ball.
Before we take another timeout, with a win in Week 17, Pittsburgh head coach Mike Tomlin extended his streak of non-losing seasons to 17, moving past George Halas and into 3rd place on the all-time list of consecutive non-losing seasons. But who does he still trail? The answer after the break.
You're watching Beat the Odds, sponsored by Superbook Westgate, Las Vegas.
Welcome back. With a win in Week 17, Pittsburgh head coach Mike Tomlin extended his streak of non-losing seasons to 17, moving past George Halas and into 3rd place on the all-time list of consecutive non-losing seasons. Who does he still trail? The answer, Mr. Bill Belichick and Tom Landry, both legendary coaches, had a streak of 19 and 20 non-consecutive losing seasons, respectively. All right, let's welcome in Jeff Slauson. He's in Cleveland with a front row seat to Flacco mania. Jeff, thanks so much for hopping on. What a season it's been for Cleveland, clinching their 3rd playoff appearance since 1999, all while going through 4 quarterbacks. How have you seen this team handle the adversity and really rally around Joe Flacco as of late?
It's been essentially like a movie because you think about it, this team came into this year, tons of hype, but a lot of questions, particularly at the quarterback position. They thought they had their quarterback, then injuries happened. Then they thought they had the replacement quarterback, then injuries happened again and again. And I remember when Joe Flacco was announced as flying into Cleveland, it was maybe he'll be just on the bottom of the depth chart, maybe potentially just a backup. Then he started, then he played really well, then he kept the job. And essentially every game that has come and gone, everybody's waiting for the shoe to drop, and it hasn't happened yet. So it seems that the team, it seems that the fans are kind of just living in this fairy tale at the moment, really enjoying the ride, because it really could not have gone any better for how bad that it actually went. Imagine a team potentially playing 4, 5 quarterbacks, really making a run at it. It's essentially unprecedented, and for it to happen in Cleveland, it's almost really fitting. This is a fan base that has gone through a lot, and by a lot I mean a lot. And to finally have a good team, not really have a quarterback, and then find one who was sitting on a couch about 5 weeks ago, it's really incredible.
It really is. Just as a fan of the game, you can't help but root for Cleveland in this situation. Now, while Flacco has only played in 5 games so far this season, he's creeping up the odds boards for comeback player of the year. Do you think there's a case for him to win this over, say, someone like Baker Mayfield, who's played all season, who obviously you know well in Cleveland too?
Yeah, that's a touchy name, I guess you could say. Cleveland Sports Radio has very much so still had people defending Baker Mayfield, which is no surprise. Yeah, if it comes down to a player that's not DeMar Hamlin with Buffalo, it does seem like it'll be the two of them, either Baker or Flacco, and that's what's fascinating, right? You can't understate what Baker has done in Tampa, or really for the past 2 years after being basically thrown out of Cleveland. But I think the importance of what Flacco has meant to a team that, if Baltimore didn't exist, would be basically a 1 seed or a 2 seed. I don't think you can underestimate that. And I think, yeah, if it's going to go to one of those two, you got to give it to Flacco, regardless of how much time in the meaning parts of the season, what this guy has meant to a team that is competing. It's unbelievable. And yeah, it needs to be recognized.
Absolutely. Now, Flacco, there is talk of him sitting for Week 18 against Cincinnati since the playoff spot is secured. What are you hearing, and what can we expect should P.J. Walker or Jeff Driscoll get the start?
We're going to make history here in Cleveland. It's looking like it'll be a 5th starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Jeff Driscoll, a 5th guy getting the helmet and running the plays for the Browns. It looks like his backup's going to be P.J. Walker, who started a few games very much so unceremoniously here in Cleveland. This is what's interesting about this whole thing. A 5th starting quarterback for a team that is looking to potentially make a run at this. They don't need to really start anybody locked into their position. So yeah, looking like it's going to be that 5th starting quarterback here, and a guy that really entered the building only a couple of weeks ago, which is actually pretty fitting. And considering how little time other quarterbacks have had, 3 weeks is essentially multiple seasons, so he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, it's just the recurring theme here. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to seeing how these guys handle this last game of the season.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And thanks to Mariah. Let's talk a little college football, guys. We got Michigan, Washington, Monday night. I think like a lot of people across America, I watched Washington for the first time. Holy cow, Michael Penix is awesome.
I think we should lead in with your thigh game that the world's getting to see for the first time ever. Hello.
That's what you're hoping for, right?
Wow. That's your takeaway from this?
Yeah. Who do you like, Ted?
Yeah. Let's look at Dave's thigh. No, let's talk about Michigan and Washington. And, of course, you had a potential look-ahead line for this game. And the look-ahead line was Michigan -6.5. There were even -7s out there on the look-ahead. So it tells us that Washington got a little bit of respect in the betting markets for what they did against Texas last week. And let's make no mistake about it, all right? You talk about the game Penix had. He was brilliant. And he's been brilliant all year. But Michigan's defense, a defense that's allowed, 10 points a game this season. They've just faced 2 elite passing offenses their last 2 ball games in Ohio State and Alabama. They did a pretty good job of shutting them both down, Jack.
Yeah, I think we should start with the fact that Alabama was flawed, especially on the offensive line, and it obviously looks a little easier now, but their quarterback had been sacked a couple of times a game on average. Penix not being sacked, they have the best offensive line in the league. They just got the award for having the best offensive line in the league. I expect them to protect Penix a lot better than what Alabama did. The athletic ability of Michigan's defense obviously is there. But this is one of those things, don't go crazy. We talked about Week 18 and not freaking out. This is not, just because it's the game of the year in college football doesn't mean you have to bet a lot. If it goes over the total, Washington probably wins and covers. If it doesn't and stays under, Michigan's probably the team. If Washington can get the ball down the field like they did last week, I think they have a good chance to extend the field and score more points. That's going to put Michigan out of their comfort zone. Give me Washington.
Going to be fun to watch, that's for sure. All right, as we've been saying, these Week 18 games can be wonky in pro football, so let these two help you out. It's their best bets, including another under from Jack over here. See which game he expects to go low. Next. Hey, welcome back to Las Vegas as we get ready to host the game and a few 100,000 of our closest friends. Just 5 more weeks to Championship Sunday. Hey, scan that QR code. It's going to take you to our website, beattheoddstv.com. All right, fellas, best bets time. Teddy, why don't you get us started?
Oh, I'm ready. And this one's really easy conceptually because we're fading a false favorite right now. Let's talk about the G-Men plus the points against Philadelphia. Philly's in free fall down the stretch. This is not a team that can lay points to anybody right now. They didn't get a single stop in the second half against a middling Arizona offense last week, and I'm not convinced they get a ton of stops here. Meanwhile, Tyrod Taylor is clearly the best option at QB for the G-Men. And of course, one team needs to win and the other team doesn't. Divisional rivalry means all these Week 18 games have meanings. G-Men hang tough. Take the points.
Yeah, it was going to be anybody against New England, and on behalf of you.
Why are
pretty
you
much.
looking at me?
I'm looking right at you. All right, New England's been horrible this year. Let's go under Kansas City and Los Angeles. These are two teams that both go under consistently, both 11-5 to the under. That's 68% to the under. They're not a secret anymore, but Los Angeles seems like they have lost all offensive identity. In Kansas City, it doesn't have a lot of options. Under the total in Kansas City, Los Angeles.
Why are you always picking on Mariah?
You do it too.
It's Week 18. I mean, come on. I mean, we rarely get a chance to beat up on Belichick.
Why don't you show off your smudge-proof glasses?
Look just like Julia Roberts,
Just
right?
like Julia Roberts.
Wow.
right.
Wow.
Pretty woman right here.
Eyes are up here.
Yeah, tell that to your niece.